Hello, and welcome to a video that's probably coming out too soon, and also is coming out too late. Two of the last three videos are going to be monthly wrap-ups because of how late my April one came out. So I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, purely because it's just a lot of books to talk about. Firstly, as always, let me know in the description, highlight of the month, what you read, what you'd recommend to me, etc. Always interested in hearing that. And I read a lot of books again. I read 12 books. In May, sorry. So May was a weird one because I was simultaneously finishing my essays for the year, and then for half of it was finished. So I had a slow start reading stuff, like I was reading journal articles and books and shit, and then in the latter half I could actually get through stuff. So out of those 12, 7 are adventurous, so you can see that I was kind of, I was reading a lot for myself. This month, a lot of fantasy, not a lot of, it was just, a lot of fantasy. I was in it, I was digging it, I still am going into, spoiler alert for June, there's going to be a lot of sci-fi fantasy there, because it's the time of the year when I do get to read for myself all the time, and you got to take advantage of that. So, pace, as always, who gives a shit, it's just a nice thing to put on there. Page number, 50% under 300. And then the others, 4 and 2 in 300 to 500, 500 plus. Nothing to sneeze at again. I think I read one non-fiction book, which is why it's 8%. I mean, this is the easiest way to see. Genres, fantasy is flying ahead at 6, with classics and literary following behind at 3. So you can see classics were stuff that I was reading for university, I think we'll see. And then mostly fantasy. I did finish one audiobook, which we'll go through, so that's 8% again, and my average rating was a 3.88. And that comes down to the fact that a lot of it is very highly weighed at the 4.5%, 4 to 4.5 stars, should I say. But there are the 2-star and the 2.25 star really weighing it down. We've flitted through those kind of general thoughts, and we'll get into the actual ratings. I'm pretty sure the last time I talked about a Star Wars book, it was the first one I talked about because it was my lowest rated. I listened to it for like over a month. I probably listened to it for about a month and a half. It's only 10 hours long. I gave it 2 stars. It's a fucking shit film, and they didn't really stray from the script, so it's just a shit version of the shit film. That's my genuine thoughts. I just wanted it over. 2.25 stars was Paradise Rot Right Here by Jenny Haval. That was one that I read for the Books and Bow favourite books that just went out, the last one before this, so if you haven't watched that, give it a look. My thoughts are there. I'm not going to say too much more other than it was a very interesting exploration that just went in a direction that wasn't for me. Big jump up to 3.5 star is, oh god, I've got to actually get these books out. Clay's Ark by Octavia E. Butler as the 3rd book in the Pattern Master Quartet. I enjoyed this one. This one is a very big departure from the 2 previous books in the series. This was the last written out of the 4, and it's the issue of now that I know what Pattern Master's about, the last book, which was written first, because this whole thing's fucking confusing. I now understand what this book was doing. It didn't reveal what it was doing until like 140 pages in. So whilst it's a very good read, it's about, it's in this post-apocalyptic world. There's been like an ecological disaster. And this man and his 2 children are on this, like in this car journey through the desert, and they are kidnapped by these people who it turns out are a kind of culty situation with possible extraterrestrial vibes going on. And it's about them trying to escape and everything, and it turned out to be, I think this would be way better on reread. I think it would be level with the other books in the series. It was just such a degree of separation from the first 2 books that I wasn't expecting quite so much, that it took me a while to get into it. So that ends up at 3.5, still enjoyable read. I'm going to be starting the last book today, so I'll finish that this month, which I'm really looking forward to getting that done. 3.75 was, it's actually here, this is all my uni reading for next year that I need to get through. It was The Sign of Four by Sherlock Holmes. I gave it 3.75 stars. It's the second novel from the Sherlock Holmes collection. So I've read A Study in Scarlet, I've read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, the first short story collection, and now I've read the second book because for uni next year, for 2 different modules, I have to read the third book and the fourth book. So, considering I've already read the first one, I thought I may as well sneak the second in and complete the whole series. The Sign of Four is classic Sherlock Holmes. I'm not going to go into it too much. I actually really recommend Sherlock Holmes. I think they're very fun reads. They are bombastic and very silly in some ways, melodramatic, really interesting. It has the natural flaws of Victorian fucking writing, which is the views on women leave a lot to be desired. And the views on people who are not English leave a lot to be desired. If you're someone who can't read that under any context, then don't bother reading Sherlock Holmes. I don't mind reading books that go into that kind of space because I think maybe it's because I'm used to reading books and having to learn about the historical context that I find reading books like that, I can separate my mind to be like, man, this is goofy in a modern context to believe that Sherlock Holmes is like, man, women can't be trusted, they're fucking crazy. Ridiculous. And also, I can put into historical context the fact that, man, this is what we were like. This is what we were like. And we'll go into that actually with a different book that I read this month, which is going to be an interesting conversation. So let's say that's foreshadowing for what we're going to get to later. There were 2 books at 4 stars. The first one's here, so I'll just grab it. I read A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I read this because I was doing a modernist essay that was talking about Mrs. Dalloway and Lady Chatterley's lover and the World War and the suffragette movement and stuff. So I read A Room of One's Own because I wanted to be able to quote it. Ended up only using one quote from the book, which was a little bit of a waste of my time, but the actual reading experience was very good. Basically, it's a staple of feminist theory. It is the conversation around the idea of that women need a space of their own and money to be able to live and function independently, to be able to create fiction, and be able to create their own, catalogue? Collection? Their own, let's say catalogue. Their own catalogue of fiction to be able to reflect and learn and grow the same way that male authors have through the idea of, say, being able to have a conversation, a piece of intertextual analysis between the two, etc., that we need to develop and allow women to create their own sense of linear timeline to be able to respond and converse between different books and different times. Very interesting. It has some really great points in it. I also read New Spring, which is the prequel to The Wheel of Time. It was written around the same time as the 11th book, just before Robert Jordan passed, and I read it after the 5th book. That's when Grace told me. That's my only reasoning for reading at that point. People say to read it at all other points. Some people say to read it at when it was originally published. Read it as the 10th, 11th book, just before Knife of Dreams. Some people say to read it at the end. Some people say to read it after the 5th, the 4th, the 6th, anywhere. So who gives a shit? I listened to Grace because if I didn't, I wouldn't have heard the end of it. It was very enjoyable. It provided a fresh new lens to Wheel of Time, which we haven't had before, separating from the main storyline and allowing two characters that are fantastic to follow in Moraine and Lan, and showing what happened before the original Eye of the World began. Very enjoyable. That's my main thought. With 2 books at 4.25. The first one was The Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb. It's the first book in the Rainwild Chronicles. When I finished it, I originally gave it 4.5. On reflection, I've dropped it down to a 4.25. It's impossible, I think it is quite literally impossible for me to sit down and read a Robin Hobb book and not, in some way, just love it. This book approaches things in a very different way. I've seen a lot of people categorise it as more of a drama, more of a period piece almost, which I would agree with. I think Evie called it it's her writing Jane Austen. It very much feels that way in this book. I'm not going to go into the actual plot because this is the fucking 10th book in the series technically. Unless if you count the other one, it's the 11th or whatever. But I really just felt strongly about this. I was reading it and I do think that part of it is laborious in the sense of that this was meant to be, rather than a quartet, it was meant to be the duology, apparently, a lot of people have said. And mainly, I just love the buddy reading experience. That it started off me and Grace, then we've added Ben into it, then it's now also Angela and Stephanie, and it's just great to have these conversations and really bask in Robin Hobb, because she deserves it. I love reading a lesser amount than I usually would. I love just spending my time just basking in the glory. And then the other, which we're going to go back to what I was talking about with Sherlock Holmes, I dropped it on the floor. I finally read To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is one that literally everyone I spoke to was like, you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird? You seem like the type of person that would have read To Kill a Mockingbird. And I don't know what that says about me, but I haven't. Well, I have now. That's true. But I hadn't at that point. I'm trying to get through the backlog that I just have at home that I just haven't read. And so I randomized a bunch of stuff, and To Kill a Mockingbird came out. I read it, gave it 4.25 stars, because as a book, I think it's just a real solid book. It has strong characters. It's told from the perspective. I don't think I need to explain To Kill a Mockingbird, but if I do, it's from a young child's perspective. This white child who their father is a lawyer. He gets hired to, or put in charge of a case because a black man has been accused of raping a white woman, and it becomes a way of exploring the town and exploring all of these different people, viewpoints, racism, etc., etc. And instead, what really enraptured me is the response to the book that I've seen. I like to read reviews. I can't help it. I love scrolling. I love reading. I love reading everyone's reviews. If you're putting barely anything, I love reading it. If you're putting laborious explanations of every feeling you had, I love it. I love people reading who are academics, and I love people who are just sitting at home having a good old time. Love going through them all. I'm addicted to it for some books. And To Kill a Mockingbird was one of those, because people love this book. It is a classic. And then some people vehemently hate it. And when I was reading, I love reading negative reviews as well for books like this. Because this book is about racism. It's about the injustice done to this black man. As a result, I want to hear what black people say about it, because if they're like, well, this is fucking crazy, then I need to understand why. I need to read why. And so that's what I did. I went through a bunch of negative reviews, and it was very interesting because the negative reviews quite often weren't to do with the book, it was to do with the reception the book has had since release, which was fascinating for me. So the one thing to definitely say is there is a white saviour trope element here. The father figure is a holier-than-thou character. He, not in every way, but he is the one that is morally just and morally good all the way through. And a lot of the reviews I saw was, this is a white saviour, it's telling a white person's story about a black person, and it doesn't take time to allow the black person's voice. It doesn't allow, because there is no, it's very much all white people with the occasional interaction with a black person that doesn't even happen until over halfway in the book, really, other than the maid they have who serves them. So the thing I find interesting with it is a lot of people are saying to have no viewpoint from a black person's perspective is wrong. But at the same time, Harper Lee, with any modicum of research, Harper Lee is telling the story that very clearly she lived through as a child. She describes how her father was a lawyer, was put in charge of a case, etc., etc. She is telling a heightened or a fictional accounting of what she lived through as a child and the confusion she had. It's clearly her working through what she saw because it's affected her. I would find it wholly inappropriate for her to assume the voice of a black person at the time when she was a child and didn't really understand what was happening. I would find it inauthentic for her to do that. I would find it unsettling and a little bit just exploitative, in my opinion. So when I see people have that opinion, I'm kind of like, I think this book puts the historical context in place for a modern audience that, as much as this book is extremely against racism, it's against prejudice, it's trying to tell the audience, trying to tell white people, you need to stop doing this, you are awful, these are human beings. No matter how positive this book is, the fact that it does not have a black voice in it, that she has no contact really, that you have to make a metaphorical connection between a white character and a black character to show that we're the same, puts a historical context in place that even though some people were trying to do better, it's still through a white lens and it's what it was. And so that's what I find. And instead, what I think happens a lot is because this book is revered as a classic and a focal text in race relations, that because, and this is taught in schools at the same time that stuff like Toni Morrison, etc. was being banned and was not allowed to be read, this was being taught in schools. And I think that is the biggest injustice involved with this book, is that it's the choice. It is the people who are in charge of what gets taught and what stories get put out, etc., made a choice that this was going to be the text that speaks, rather than texts like Toni Morrison, etc. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that this book immediately puts the white people in a sympathetic point of view. It puts the main character that you're following is a sympathetic character for having to struggle to fight for black people's rights, and that is an uncomfortable situation, I think. But I think at the same time, that is a critique of society. That is a critique of government and schools and the people who decide what goes on a curriculum. I don't believe that is a criticism that can be levelled against the book, because I think if you view it in a larger literary canon, if you put this alongside Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, Zora Neale Hurston, etc., when you add it to a canon, this provides a different voice, and it provides a different historical context that continues to critique white people, and it continues to critique white people the same way that people are talking about the white saviour trope, etc. And as a result, I think it's just, rather than hating the book because of that, I think it needs to lend itself into a new conversation of reframing the novel. And that's where I fall on it. I still think there is value in this book. I still think it was extremely emotional. All of the goddamn court scenes, they are riveting. I could not put the book down when we were in court. It was so absorbing. It's heartbreaking, it's miserable, it is also distanced, and I think that the stuff that people hate about the book and the people that love the book all need to be melded into one. I think the book is existing in a very ambiguous place, and I think there's just a lot to appreciate and critique. I don't believe in either panning it or loving it wholeheartedly. I just think it's extremely interesting, honestly. I could not shut up about the book when I finished it after reading people's thoughts, as you can see by the fact that I haven't shut the fuck up about it now. In my continuation of series, I then went on to give The Tombs of Atuan, which is the second Earthsea book by Ursula K. Le Guin, 4.5 stars. very different from the first book, a lot darker. It follows this girl who has been chosen by, it's the idea that there's this temple, and that when the person who is the kind of manifestation of their deity dies, then they find someone who is born at the exact same time and they replace them. And so it's this person kind of just being put into a cult scenario, and it's this child's life, and it was very sad, very melancholy. The prose is so engrossing. It was really, really good. It had me tearing up at the end because it just told such a simple story. I think there's also a lot to be said for, I don't know whether it will hold true with the other books, but the first two books I find massive, massive conversations that Ursula K. Le Guin is having with previous texts. For instance, A Wizard of Earthsea, I think, has unbelievable ties to Frankenstein, and I also believe that The Tombs of Atuan has a massive, massive connection to the Labyrinth from Greek mythology. The what's the word? Theseus and Ariadne. I think it has massive connections there. Is that who it is? I think it's Theseus and Ariadne. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but that's what I got from it. Very, very sad. Very, very good. I finished this at the start of the month. I started it in April, but I finished it in May. It was Time Shelter. At the time, he was just shortlisted, and then when I finished this book, yeah, the guy won. Understandably, because this book slaps real goddamn hard. He's the first Bulgarian to win the Booker International Prize, and this book basically tells the story where our main character meets this very flamboyant, enigmatic person called Gostine, and they are creating this time shelter, which is a place that each floor has a different level that is a different decade, so 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. And it's for people who have memory disorders, have dementia, Alzheimer's, etc., to go and live and be able to feel comfortable. And the book starts on such a small scale of this thing, of this place, telling stories of the people in there. That was my favourite part of the book. There are some stories in here that were so off-the-wall, wacky, interesting. I loved it. And then the book expands and grows and becomes world-spanning. Well, should I say continent-spanning. And that was the part where you need to have a lot of knowledge of Eastern European culture, which I have a fair amount, but not... There were specifics in here that I kind of had to do my research about to understand fully. It was great. Like, genuinely, I understand why it won. I think it does everything the Booker International's always looking for, and well deserved the victory. I was really glad to see it won, because then I can say I'm super cool, and I read it before it won. And then my last 4.5, I need to stand up to get. I read House of Chains by Stephen Erickson, gave it 4.5 stars because Malazan just slaps. Malazan is one of my favourite series in the terms of just drawing me into a story. I don't think there's a series quite so much that feels like a fantasy, quite like Malazan does, that I'm reading at the moment. Like, when I read Robin Hobb, there are the ties to reality, in a lot of the things I've been reading. Malazan just feels like a different place, a different world with different rules, and I understand those rules in a lot of ways, and it's growing, and I'm just enveloped. I can't wait to get to the next one. I think I'm really hoping to start getting through The Wheel of Time and Malazan a lot quicker, because I've really enjoyed just taking it slow. I'm just finding them a little irresistible at the moment. They're really calling me. And then the final book, for anyone that knows me will not be surprised, and it was also in the books, it was in the Willow video, is The Convenience Store Woman by Saki Murata. It was the only 5-star I gave this month, last month, because it's the best. It's just the best. It's one of my favourite books. I love it in every which way but Wednesday. I'm not going to go into it because I've spoken ad nauseum about it on the channel, but it was in the Willow video. I gave it 5 stars there. I reread it. It could be a book that I use in my dissertation. Love it. So that's it. That's the end. I think we did a good job. We got through a lot. I mean, we can see here, It's just a lot to read in a month, you know? We'll see whether I slow down. I mean, technically during the summer I should speed up because I have more time, but I find that I read less during the summer. We'll see whether that happens, but if you did enjoy, please do like, make sure to let me know what you read, and, as always, have a nice rest of your day.